Hi, I'm Ellen with artsyprettyplants.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make a marbled concrete planter. And we're going to do that using a white concrete and an acrylic paint. Now it's important to know that not all acrylic paints will work with concrete, so take a look in the description below where I have the materials listed so that you're sure to get the right paint. You can also go to my website, artsyprettyplants.com, and the full written detailed tutorial is there as well. And please hit the subscribe button just below the video. That way you'll be notified every time there's a new tutorial. So let's get started. Your first step in making this concrete marbled planter is to create the drainage hole. The way to do this is to go ahead and heat up the hot glue gun to a low temperature. Then take your straw and cut it to about 1/4 of an inch. Now, I only did one drainage hole here. In the end, I went back and ended up adding a second one, so I recommend going ahead and cutting 2 pieces of straw and doing this twice. What you want to do is add glue to both ends of the straw. So go ahead and glue your first end into the container and then add hot glue on top of that. That way concrete won't get into the straw, making it difficult to remove. Next, you want to make a mark on your inner mold. So take it, put it down on top of the straws, and then line it up with the top of your outer mold. That mark will be your stopping point once you put the concrete in there, since you won't be able to see where you need to stop. The next step is to mix up the cement. Pour in your cement and add some water. I recommend adding cold water to this to make it a little bit easier to work with. And also please note that the amount that I have here ended up not being enough, and I needed to add more towards the end before I finished casting the piece. The consistency you're looking for is what I'm doing here. Once you can pick it up and drop it and it sort of slumps out, that's a formed moldable consistency. That's going to be the consistency that you want. I added white to my container first because I wanted it to be white, and then I added green from the bottom up. And then I divided up the other containers with also the white concrete because I was doing 3 different colors of green. It turned out that you couldn't even tell the difference between some of the colors of green, and I would have been better off just leaving it with one color. So take your paint and add it to one of your bowls of white concrete. For the amount of concrete that I have in that bowl, I added about 1 tablespoon. I may have ended up adding a little bit more as I went along, just depending on how dark it looked to me. One thing you want to be sure you don't do is don't add too much acrylic paint because you'll start to weaken the concrete. Once your colors are mixed, they may be a little bit dry. Go ahead and add a little bit of water if that happens, and so that will soften them up to the right consistency again. Here's where you can see the straw that I added to get the second drainage hole. Now there's many ways that you can marble a planter. I took the colors and I sort of created triangle shapes and pushed them down into the sides of the bowl, into the white. I did this in several places. And this is all going to come down to what your aesthetic is. You can add more, you can add less, you can add it in triangles, you can section it up and do it that way. I like the ombres into the white, and it creates sort of a waterfall look. So the triangles seem to do a nice job of creating that effect. Now here's where I had to go back and mix some more white concrete, and then I added it in until I felt I had enough. You want it to overflow so that you can get a cleaner edge. So take your inner mold and insert it in the center of the outer mold. Make sure that you push down where you marked your stopping point. Don't push too hard, you don't want to bend the straws, but make sure that it does contact with the top of those straws. It'll make it much easier when you go to demold this. Whatever overflow you have, just scrape it off of the edges. Once you have your inner mold in there, it's set, and you've added your weights, that's when you'll clean up the edges. The pieces that I'm using here are just extra pieces from other projects that I did. They're nice and weighty, so they were easy to use for this particular purpose. To clean up the edges, I like to take a paintbrush and dip it in water and just run it around the edges until you've got it nice and smooth. This will make it a lot easier when it comes time to sand the piece. Now here I put this on a board. I wish I had remembered to do this from the beginning, would have made it just a little bit easier, but what you didn't see off camera, I already shook it and tapped it quite a bit. You want to make sure that your air bubbles will release. And again, I needed to clean up the edges because I didn't do this initially. Let your concrete cure for 24 hours. Then when it comes time to demold, I recommend that you use a heat gun. A heat gun will make it much easier and also much more likely that you can reuse this mold because you won't have to cut it out of the mold. The place that often gives me trouble is the bottom where the hot glue has attached itself to the container. That likes to stick, so I usually have to go back and hit that a few times with the heat gun to make sure that it will allow the concrete to drop down. Sometimes I get lucky and those two pieces of straw that are still inside of the planter will actually come out with the container. In this case they didn't, but it's very easy to get out. Just take a drill and drill into those straw holes. It should pull the straws and the glue right out. As you can see here, the planter isn't all that white. That's because there's still a lot of moisture remaining inside of the concrete. It's going to take about another day, maybe even a little bit longer than that, to become fully white. Now I don't usually seal my planters. I sealed this one because I know that once I plant it and put soil in it, the soil is going to leach through the porous holes. it's going to discolor the planter. And since it's this nice white concrete and it's marbled, I didn't want that to happen. So I actually used 2 different sealers. I did that because the sealer I'm using for the inside will darken the concrete, and I didn't want that on the outside. But I feel it does a little bit better of a job of sealing the concrete. And then on the outside, I used a spray sealer that should be sufficient for the outside. It also will keep the concrete looking the way it did before I sealed it. Now this particular spray sealer requires spraying it once, coming back in 3 to 5 minutes, and spraying it again. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you love concrete and you love planters, I've got lots of other concrete planter tutorials, both on my website and other videos here as well. And thank you so much for watching. Please hit subscribe so you'll be notified every time a new video tutorial comes out. Thank you.